Hey everyone, the Still Got It podcast is brought to you by Sutton Basketball Academy, where the next generation of hoopers are made. Whether you're just picking up a ball for the first time or chasing a college scholarship, our year-round academy trains boys and girls ages 5 through 18 to become peak performers both on and off the court. At Sutton Basketball Academy, it's bigger than the game. We build skills, confidence, and character that will last a lifetime. Learn more at SuttonBasketballAcademy.com. Hey everyone, welcome to the Still Got It podcast, where we sit down with former college hoopers to relive their journey, from playground dreams to big-time college moments and beyond. Each episode, we dig into players' early days in the game, the recruiting process, that first taste of life in college, and the highs and lows of their playing career. We'll also look at what came after the final buzzer, life beyond basketball, and where the game has taken them since. I'm your host, Nick Sutton, and this is Still Got It. Real stories, honest reflections, and a deeper look at the game beyond the box score. And if you're enjoying what you're hearing, be sure to like and subscribe. All right, welcome to Still Got It. Right now we are joined by Ricky Price. Played a pivotal role for the Duke teams in the early to mid-90s, and it's a pleasure to have him here. Ricky, how are you?
Excellent. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, us too. Thanks for coming on. Well, let's just jump right in. So you grew up in Gardena, if I'm saying that right, Gardena, right in the middle of one of the greatest hotbeds of basketball talent this country's ever seen. What was the Price household like growing up? What was the energy, the vibe? What was the foundation that you were raised on?
Great question. LA is home, born and raised in Los Angeles. If you've been to LA, there are like 200 cities within the city of LA County, Gardena, Carson, Compton, East LA, Westchester. I mean, they're all there. And it was just, it was an incredible experience, growing up with the weather, the people, obviously family. And I didn't really get to really take advantage of it like I should have. When I go back to LA, I'm like, how the hell did I leave this place? Like, what was I thinking? I mean, it's 75 degrees on Christmas, and I'm wearing a, tank top and some shorts. What was I thinking leaving this place? But, I tell people all the time, it's important to go away to college, go away at some point and see other places, see other things. And I was able to do that. And as a result, I was able to grow up a little bit and see the outside world.
Nice. Well, yeah. Also, yeah. So in the mid '90s, like the high school basketball scene was unreal. You had, Miles Simon, the O'Bannon brothers, Paul Pierce, Andre Miller, and you weren't just in the mix. You were one of those headliners. So how competitive was that era, and did it feel like the region was kind of feeding multiple NCAA title runs at once, or contenders at once?
Absolutely. I mean, LA is a hotbed. California is a hotbed for talent, in all sports, but really the concentration in Los Angeles was probably the best in the country. Maybe you can rival other states like Indiana, maybe New York, Michigan, Texas always has some good hoopers, but the state of California, LA specifically, always has some great basketball players. You look at some of the great players today, James Harden and Westbrook and Paul George, all hail, from Los Angeles, and Baron Davis, just to name a few greats, Kawhi Leonard. And so, I think we honed our skills playing outside. And Nick, you and I talked about this in LA, because the weather's so good, it offers you the ability to go outside and play on the blacktop with double rims. And if you think you got a jump shot, you really don't have a jump shot until you can shoot
Right.
and make jump shots on double rims and chain nets. That's when your jump shot is falling, when you can make shots on those type of rims. And that's what we played on growing up, and it helped the jump shot, it helped the competitive nature, and it also fueled people to, rise above and become the cream of the crop. And along the way, I was able to do that, which I give all the credit to, growing up in that SoCal area.
Do you have any, memory that stands out? I don't know. Did you play against Paul Pierce, Andre Miller on a regular basis, or was there a conference final or something cool that you look back on that was a good memory?
Absolutely. Well, Paul Pierce is 1 year behind. Jim Miller, we are the same year, and then O'Bannon brothers are 1 year ahead. Jock Vaughn was in that crew as well. And so, we all played in the same organization called Slam and Jam. Slam and Jam was one of the biggest AAU programs, in the 80s and 90s when I came up. And all the top players played for Izzy Washington. Slam and Jam got arrested. So he was like a grassroots guy. I think, you would know like a guy like, who's a Boo Williams. He was like Boo Williams in California, basically. And, he would bring up all the young kids. And a lot of these kids come from single, parent homes from nothing, and they could just hoop. He put teams together, tournaments together, and we compete nationally, and we would, usually come out on top. And the O'Bannon brothers, Paul Pierce, all these, Prince, Shea Cotton, Baron Davis, all these guys, play in this Toby Bailey, play in this organization. And, those are the memories that I remember, going to AAU tournaments and trips with these guys. Because the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teams all travel together. So we're all on the same bus. We're all going to the same places. And all of these guys are getting Division I scholarships. So now you get to play against them in college. I guess the biggest memory would be, and Nick, you and I talked about this, when I was being recruited, obviously UCLA was recruiting me very, very hard. I'm from the city. I'm from the area. Both my parents went to UCLA. And it's crazy because obviously I choose Duke. And we play UCLA my freshman year. And this is the year they had Charles and Ed O'Bannon, Tyus Edney, Toby Bailey, Henderson. They had Chris. They had the
They ended up
dream
winning
team.
the title. Yeah.
And they ended up winning the title. We played UCLA that year, my freshman year. We go to UCLA and they beat the brakes off us by like 25. And then they go on to win a national championship. And I'm saying to myself, well, damn, did I choose the right school?
Well, speaking of recruitment, your recruitment story is kind of wild because I know that Kansas and Roy Williams were on you big from the jump. And I don't know, rumor is that Roy Williams was staying up late, expecting a call from you to commit to Kansas when actually you had chosen Duke. So I guess maybe until you lit up the ABCD camp and Duke became, a player in the recruiting process. But yeah, what was your just general recruiting process like? And being a California kid, like you were saying, like, did you seriously consider staying, going to UCLA or another California school?
That's a great question. Recruitment was incredible. Every school pretty much recruited me except for the University of North Carolina. And it was crazy because Dean Smith called me just to tell me that he wasn't going to recruit me. And
Wow.
you never see that. Like,
Did he give a reason?
He said that, they had Jerry Stackhouse and, that he was at the same position and he was going to be there for a while. So he thought. But,
Right.
at least he gave me the courtesy of letting me know that I don't know if I would have went to North Carolina anyway, but that was the first and only person to, call and say that he wasn't going to recruit me. Every other school in the nation pretty much put their bid in. My final 5 was Duke, Kansas, Arkansas, Cal, and Arizona. And for me, the Duke visit was just incredible. Grant Hill was my favorite player, and he was the host of my visit. And so it was an otherworldly visit, and getting a chance to shadow him for 48 hours and see the fanfare that he got was incredible. Obviously, playing in the ACC, the best conference in the country, playing for the best coach in the country, academically, Duke is a top 10 school in the nation. It just checked all the boxes. But Nick, you are right. Kansas was in the lead for the longest until my Duke visit. And Roy and I probably had the best connection of recruit and coach. He was such a genuine good guy. And I really wanted to go to Kansas, but Duke ultimately won out with the things I mentioned earlier. And then my relationship with Coach K obviously grew later, and the rest is history. But my recruitment was definitely an incredible story. And I'm glad you mentioned it. It brings back memories.
Yeah, I bet.
Before we move on, Ricky, I don't know if you're aware, there's a sliding doors moment here because Roy the next year ends up going hard after Pierce because he missed out on you. And very famously, he gave Paul Pierce a puzzle and said, "You're the missing piece of the puzzle." Did Roy pull out any tricks like that for you?
Ray was just a good old-fashioned Southern guy. He was the best thing that he did that I remember was when you could start making phone calls, he was adamant about being the first person that I talked to in the recruiting process. Up until your junior year, they can send you letters and send you correspondence through the mail, but they can't actually talk to you. And so the second that, you could talk to, the recruit, he wanted to be the first guy. And he called me at 12:01. Started at 12 o'clock, called me at 12:01 to make sure he was the first guy. And, I'll never, ever forget that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, still talking about the end of your high school, you were on the 1994 McDonald's All-American game, which, like most McDonald's All-American games, are pretty stacked. You had Rafe LaFrance, Antoine Walker, and then, Iverson, KG, Paul Pierce, Kobe, and the years around you. You ended up winning the dunk contest. Trajan Langdon wins the three-point contest.
Right.
Did you build any early chemistry with him during that McDonald's week, or did it feel like the beginning of something special for the next chapter at Duke?
What's crazy is I just saw Trajan the other day. So
No way.
I'm at the hotel in New York, and we're playing Kansas just a couple days ago, and I was at the game coming down from the hotel. Door opens, and guess who I see? It's Trajan Langdon. And, that was my roommate in college for 3 years, and he was my guy. And me and Trajan built a relationship through the AAU, program system, throughout the years, playing against each other and different tournaments and stuff like that. And obviously, Coach was very adamant about letting us know that we were both being recruited together. He wanted to bring us both in. Obviously, he was the best shooter in the nation, and I was, one of the most athletic wing guys in the nation. And then we added Wojo to that, who was one of the best point guards in the nation, and that was going to be our three-man class. And so I didn't talk to Wojo as much until I got to Duke, but me and Trajan were in constant contact, checking in on each other on the recruiting process. And I think he might have committed first, and then I was shortly thereafter. Then it was Wojo, and that was our class. But we had already said we're going to be roommates. I'm going to bring the TV, you bring the stereo. Let's get it.
One quick follow-up, Ricky, just because, it's a really unique time, that mid-90s crew, so many greats, as Nikki mentioned. There's also guys like Shea Cotton, who at the time, people would have said, this guy's going to be a superstar in the league, and doesn't actually end up playing in the league. So I guess, like, when looking back on it, and it might even be a message for kids today, like, every kid thinks he's going to play in the NBA, even kids who seem like a sure thing. What at the time, did you have any inclination of who's going to make it, who wasn't? And looking back, what do you think kind of did differentiate?
I mean, it's really a crapshoot. I mean, Shea Cotton was a surefire hit. You couldn't have told anybody who was listening that Shea Cotton wasn't going to make it. And I remember Shea Cotton. I played with his brother James Cotton, who played at Long Beach State, and we played together in AAU. He's in my class, and then Shea would always be at the practices, and he played with the younger team. Like I said, the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teams traveled together, and he was on those younger teams. And so those practices were sometimes together. Imagine a practice with Shea Cotton, James Cotton, Ricky Price, Toby Bailey, Jacques Vaughn, Ed O'Bannon, and Charles O'Bannon in the same damn
Incredible.
practice. The AAU, it was unbelievable. And we didn't know it at the time, but we were getting better each and every day, pushing each other. And that's what the AAU and Slam and Jam SoCal organization gave to us. And it was incredible. But to answer your question, in order to make it to the NBA, obviously you have to have talent. You got to be in the right place in the right time, and you have to have a little bit of luck. The stats are the stats. Less than 1% make it to college, and even less than that make it to the pros. And so there are going to be a lot of good players coming out of high school who don't get the opportunity, to make it. And, Shea Cotton, unfortunately, was one of those guys. And, but you couldn't have told me that this kid wasn't going to make it
Right.
after watching him play through middle school, high school, and then, beyond. But sometimes that's how the chips, that's how they fall.
And
Yeah.
sorry, just lastly on that McDonald's game, just because I'm fascinated by that year. So Iverson, I believe, was in jail and missed
He
the game,
was.
right?
Hmm.
Was there any discussion of like it's not like today when all the kids kind of know each other and have known each other for years. Like, did you guys even know about Iverson that you played with him, and what were people saying?
Absolutely. Everybody knew about Iverson. He was unequivocally the number one player in the nation. And when he got into his legal troubles and had to go away, Felipe Lopez ascended and became the best player. So it was always those two, and then Gerard Ward was that third guy who was considered as the number one guy. But Iverson unequivocally was the best player in the class of 1994. Obviously, his circumstances are so unfortunate. We all know. I think there's a documentary now on
Mhm.
him on Amazon or Netflix, and it's incredible. But he was for sure the best player, and had he been in the game, it would have been even that much better. But and I don't know if I would have won a dunk contest. It probably would have been between, you know,
Right.
him, and Felipe Lopez. But imagine Iverson playing in a 1994 game. That would have made it even that much better.
Mhm. Well, yeah, going back to Wojo and Trajan, just what were your first impressions of them, and how would you describe, what made each of their games special?
Trajan was a perfectionist. He was really, one of the best, if not the best shooter I've ever seen. I played against Ray Allen, never played against Steph. I saw JJ up close and personal, but Trajan, had the softest, purest jump shot I've ever seen. And he was an absolute marksman. But, the reason why is because he worked at it. He was, an absolute gym rat. Obviously from Anchorage, Alaska. I don't know if there's too much to do there. So, outside of skiing, snowboarding, and, 12 hours of darkness, I don't think there's much to do. And so Trajan, used his time wisely, and he was in the gym. And at 6'4", he had one of the best, pull-up jump shots. He had one of the best standstill three-point shots. He developed range. His body was strong. He was just a high IQ basketball player, and for the longest he held that title of best, shooter in Duke history until a guy named JJ Redick comes along and shatters all the records. But Trey was my roommate as well. One of my best friends in college, and really my road dog. And I'm so proud of him now. He's doing a great job in Detroit as the head of basketball operations. And Detroit, I think, may be number one in the East right now
Yeah.
with how well they're playing. And,
Mhm.
that's all credit to Trajan Langdon building that team. Wojo, I didn't know as much. Never really played against him in AAU. Obviously, I'm California. He's in Maryland. But, meeting Wojo was great. He was one of the best defenders I'd ever seen in pressuring the basketball.
Mm.
Coach talks about Bobby Hurley. I think he mentions Duhan and then Wojo. Imagine getting the ball out of the out of bounds, and you got to go 90 feet, and you see Wojo, and he's dogging you the whole way, full court, turning you, disrupting you, just bothering you. And he was one of the best floor generals and on ball defenders that I had seen. And he gave us a spark, especially later on, junior and senior year, and really made the team go. And obviously Wojo is a big time coach now. I think he is doing some stuff in the G League after coaching at Marquette. And so all these guys are incredibly successful, and I was fortunate enough. And then don't forget Rashawn McLeod.
Mhm.
He joined
Right.
our class as well through transfer, and obviously he had a pretty good career too at Duke. That class of '94 was pretty good.
For sure. Well, yeah. So now stepping on campus in Durham, your freshman year kind of starts, I don't know, as expected, and then after 10 games, Coach K steps away for back surgery, and kind of everything flips. Y'all go 13-18. It's the first losing season in years. As an 18-year-old coming in with huge expectations, what was that kind of emotional whiplash like?
It was tough because in high school I had 4 coaches in 4 years, and so the reason why I went to Duke is because I wanted some stability. And I knew the coach was one of the best coaches in the country. I didn't believe that he would, leave to go anywhere during my tenure. And so that's one of the reasons why I chose Duke. And then here we go. I get to Duke as a freshman, and we're 9, 10 games in, and he's out. And so for me, it's now 5 coaches in 5 years. Pete Gaudet takes over. And so tough pill to swallow. Plus, you feel responsible for letting, the Duke culture down. Duke had never had a losing season like we had my freshman year. We're coming off of, being in the finals against Arkansas, losing, just by a hair of a, chinny chin chin. And before, Elite Eight, and then obviously 2 national championships with Leitner and Bobby Hurley. And so 3 out of 4 years, before I get there, we're rolling. And I get there and we're not. And so I'm like, yo, this is crazy. So it was a tough pill to swallow, but, he was able to come back and right the ship. And it was crazy because we go 13-18 as a freshman, 18-13 as a sophomore, 26-7 my junior year, and then 32-4 my senior year. And so you can see the uptick of getting back to our winning ways, but it started with that subpar freshman year.
Yeah. Well, one of those games, the double OT Duke-UNC Classic, was one of the wildest games ever. You had Stackhouse, you had Rasheed Wallace, Capel hitting a near half-court bomb to force double OT. Cameron goes absolutely bonkers. In the moment, I know you were gutted, but do you remember what that atmosphere felt like inside Cameron? Was that, one of the craziest times?
It was the first time that you couldn't hear the coaches in the huddle speaking to us. After Jeff hit that shot and we go back to the huddle, it was so loud in there that Pete Gaudet he's not even standing, a foot away from us. I couldn't hear a word he was saying. It was like, that's what I heard. And he might have been screaming at the top of his lungs, but it was so loud in there. I think it's never been as loud in Cameron as it was that particular day. The stakes were high. It's Carolina. We're the tremendous underdog. And for us to battle like we did to fight those guys tooth and nail that particular day, and the crowd gave us everything. And it was easily the best game that I'd ever been in.
Yeah. Well, and then a couple more, highlight games that seemed to stand out was another UNC game. It was the Calabria. Calabria. Sorry.
Yeah.
Game winner. Duke has the lead. UNC storms back. He hits the game winner. You get the final shot, and it just misses at the horn. How tough was that loss for the group and for you personally?
It was tough. And I tell this story all the time because it's a story of resilience, and it's a story of, you got to have the quick, memory where you got to just brush it off and get on to the next play. So obviously Calabria hits the shot. I get the last shot. I've taken this shot, I don't know, 1,000 times. It's my signature move. One dribble pull up, going right or left. I think I probably make more shots going left, but I'm going right this time. And as I'm making the move, I take the shot, and it was straight as an arrow. I just knew it was going to go in, but it was a tad bit short. Hit the front of the rim. We end up losing. I remember, being the last one in the locker room, water's raining down my head. And I say to myself, if I ever get an opportunity to make another game-winning shot, I promise I'm going to knock it down. I can't make this stuff up. 2 weeks later at Maryland, almost the same situation. This time I'm on the left side of the court. I get the ball, 3, 2, 1, and I let it go, and it's all net. And so in a way, it's vindication, for missing the shot at Carolina to making the shot at Maryland. But I tell people all the time, I think the reason why I made the shot at Maryland is because I had the disappointment of missing the shot at Carolina, and I had to learn what it took and how to change to make the slight change to make the shot. In 2 weeks, I was able to do that. So that felt really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was literally my next question was about the cold-blooded buzzer beater at Maryland.
See, I knew that. I was in your meetings, your production meetings. I'm like, he's going to ask me this.
Well, now going to junior year, you're heading into junior year. Duke's on the rise. So are you. but you break your finger. Rhythm shifts, your role shifts. How much did that injury impact your development and your confidence, your junior year?
Man, I blame the Duke culture and coach for all that. All that diving on the floor for loose ball shit that we do all the time. And that's exactly what happened. The ball was loose, and I dive for it, and I go, and my right hand hits the ground and snaps my one of my fingers, and it's a break. And I had never been hurt. Well, I broke a bone in high school, so that's not true. That's the second time that I've been hurt, where I broke a bone actually. And it was a small break, one of those things where you got to sit out, but it kind of messed up my rhythm. And it's on my shooting hand as well. And so catching is difficult, catching and gathering. This Nick as a shooter, you got to catch and gather and so it was difficult to do with the broken finger on your shooting hand. And it took me some time, and I lost some conditioning as well. So I missed a few practices, probably a 6-week injury, but the guys are moving on. We're in the preseason and guys are rolling, and we got a nice team. And at my position, there's definitely a log jam. We have Jeff Capel, we have Trajan, Chris Carrawell, Nate James, Mike Chappelle are freshmen. Wojo is still there. And so we're talking, Rashawn McLeod is there. So we're talking about, 7, 8 guys for 3 positions, and you miss some time and, you can fall behind. And so that's exactly what happened. And it kind of disrupted the first part and really disrupted my junior year, which wasn't the greatest. And so, I had to deal with that as well. But, you live and you learn, and those are the things that you have to deal with, when you play basketball. There's the threat of injury.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, having to deal with setbacks and interruptions, before your senior season, you were suspended for plagiarism, which was obviously a major life detour. So now, as an adult who mentors young athletes, what do you remember most about that chapter of your life, and what did you take from it that still sticks with you today?
That's a great question. I mean, there's a lot to take from that. Obviously, it really happened my junior year. And so when I talk about the disruption as a junior year, the injury, the not playing well that season, and then you compound that with, turning in a paper, that's not yours. And so it really was the whole junior year that set up, me being suspended my senior year. And, what I tell people all the time is, everybody has periods that they just do stupid things. And I challenge anybody, any 19-year-old, not to do something that's pretty damn stupid during the course of that time. And that was one of my moments that I just had a lapse of judgment and made a poor decision. And I paid the ultimate price. And so when that happens, what do you do next? Do you, sulk? Do you run? Do you hide? Do you blame others? Or do you take full accountability, take responsibility, and then make the necessary changes, to right the ship? And, that's what I did. And so I had to sit the first part of the semester, the first semester of my senior year, which meant I couldn't join the team until December. And, so I missed basically half the season, and it was a tough pill to swallow. And that decision kind of led to my senior year having, not being able to find and crack the rotation. And, it was a tough pill to swallow because, I go from being a sophomore who was supposed to be a first-round draft pick to, not having a chance to play in the NBA.
Yeah.
And so, I tell people all the time, these decisions that you make, you have to be smart, you have to be wise. And if you don't, there are consequences.
Yeah. Real quick, just because, and if you were a player today at Duke and you had your sophomore season, you probably are going pro. At the time, Duke had never had anybody go early.
Right.
And did you think about it at all? Was that even in your mind, or was that like, I think Brand and Will Avery were the first people ever in the program to go early. And, today, had that played out, would do you think that would have played out differently? You know, you would have had a shorter career?
And that's a great question. And, there was no question in my mind that I should have left my sophomore year. I think the thought process for me was I was scared. No one had left Duke early. Grant Hill was just a year before me. Leitner was a year before that. And Bobby Hurley was, a year before that. And they were unbelievable players. And they did 4 years. So what gave me the right to leave early? And I wasn't as good as they were. But the problem and what I wasn't thinking about was that times are changing. And so now the one and done, the leaving early, it's upon us. And so the NBA is about potential. And potentially, I could have been one of those guys. And I was frequently on draft boards as a sophomore, as being a top, 20, 25 pick. I definitely would have been a first rounder that year, but I was scared to make the jump. And but I should have. And as a result, I had my junior year happen, which led to my senior year. And so if you leave early, those things don't happen. But you got to be ready. You got to feel that you're ready. And you also have to have the support from the coaching staff. And I don't think anyone was thinking about, me leaving early as a sophomore. That wasn't in the cards. But, the way that the game is set up and the way that things are trending in the NBA, young underclassmen who are having great seasons are leaving. Iverson left that year. Maurice Taylor, left that year.
Stephon Marbury, I think.
Stephon Marbury left that year. So the trend is here. You just got to be ready to go when the time is right. And I talk about that in the book extensively, but that is definitely a point that of emphasis.
Next time on Still Got It.
Easily is the most athletic human being I've ever seen. Left and right, and they got back into the game, and they got back quick. Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing for any basketball player, is knowing when to quit.